is Kathy Lazarus, and I've been asked by the Los Altos Affordable Housing Alliance to be the moderator for this evening's conversations about accessory dwelling units. It's a rapidly changing field, and I bet that 5 years ago, most of us never even heard of ADU, or accessory dwelling unit. But the world has changed, and we're trying to come up with solutions to increase the supply of affordable housing in our communities to alleviate the housing crisis. So our objective tonight is to provide lots of different ideas and perspectives about the world of accessory dwelling units, which is rapidly changing. To begin, I'd like to introduce our planning director from the City of Los Altos, Guido Perspicone, who will give us an update on the new laws that took effect January 1, 2020. And then after that, I'll go ahead and introduce the rest of the panel, if that's okay. Do you want me to introduce you now? I'll introduce you later then, John. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Guido and let him give us an overview.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
So, yes, we're going to go over some of the state law changes. As you can see, I've titled the presentation Accessory Dwelling Unit State Law Changes for Now, because these laws have changed significantly. Every year for the last 3 years, there have been changes to state law, encouraging more and more development of ADUs. So just a little bit of my background and my credentials. I am a certified AICP planner. I have 16 years of urban and regional planning experience. And this is now my third time rewriting an ADU ordinance, twice with the City of East Palo Alto and now here. And when I'm not here, I'm coaching my son's baseball team, and those are my two beautiful kids and my lovely wife. And I live in South San Jose, and I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity to be working for Los Altos. So how did we get here? So there's a lot of myriad of reasons in terms of how we got here and whatnot, but the real gist of the matter is we have a significant jobs to housing imbalance. Last year, within the last 12 months, there were approximately 55,000 jobs that were created in the greater Bay Area, and there were 7,000 housing units that were built. And those numbers get perpetuated for the last 8 or 9 years. Just to give some perspective, Anthony, who's in the back, gave a presentation to the Downtown Collaborative. So Santa Clara County's GDP, if we were just a country, would be $616 billion. That's more, almost as close to the state of Colorado. So we obviously are in a huge economic powerhouse with a significant jobs to housing imbalance. So how has the state responded? So these are just 6 of the bills affecting ADUs that got adopted within the last legislative cycle. In total, since 2016, there have been approximately 12 bills adopted just related to ADUs. There have been approximately 30 for housing overall. And so we are trying to, as best we can, respond to those and eventually bring an ordinance to City Council. So I'm going to go just very quickly through some of these bills and then kind of summarize in terms of where we are in terms of the current regulatory landscape. So, SB 13, impact fees cannot be assessed on units, ADU units that are less than 750 square feet. ADUs can be counted towards the state's RENA goal. Our RENA is our number given by the state of California to meet our affordable housing goals. If a garage is converted, replacement parking cannot be required. AB 68, lot coverage and lot size cannot be used in terms of writing an ADU ordinance. An ADU application must be approved within 60 days of a completed application, unless it's part of the actual structure of the house. And lot coverage, FAR, open space, and other design standards cannot prohibit at least a minimum of an 800 square foot, a detached ADU. AB 1670. The CCNRs, if you live within an HOA, are void if they prohibit the development of ADUs. And AB 671, the city must create a plan within the next housing element to incentivize and promote ADUs. So the housing element is the city's long-term housing policies and goals that get adopted every 5 years by the city council. We are in the next cycle. By December 2022, the city has to have a housing element that's certified by the state. And within that plan, we must show how we're promoting and incentivizing ADUs. So in total, if you are on a single-family property, you are allowed by right to have a detached 800 square foot ADU, and you are allowed by right to have a 500 square foot junior ADU within the confines of the existing house. There are no parking requirements for the junior ADU. There's no parking requirements for an ADU if it's within an existing carport or garage. No parking requirements for an ADU if it's near transit or a part of a car share vehicle program. And ADUs within the body of the existing house cannot be required to have separate utilities. So in total, just to kind of summarize just the lay of the land, you'll see that there is a detached ADU and there is a junior ADU. That's allowed on a single family or properties that are zoned for residential.
What if you already maxed your emissions?
If you have already maxed out your FAR and lot coverage, you're still allowed to have at least an 800 square foot detached ADU. This is another scenario, just an attached ADU. And the bills go further and say if it's a multi-family development, and here in Los Altos, we're defining multi-family as having 2 or more units on a lot, you're allowed to have 2 detached ADUs, and 25% of the area within the structure can be for ADUs. So that concludes my presentation. We will be recommending that the City Council adopt this ordinance on an etch-to-sketch because it's probably going to change in 6 months. So that will be part of our recommendation. So I now can either take questions or...
Sure. If you have questions, not about your personal lot situation, because after the next panel, you'll be able to wander and ask people individually about your personal situations. But for general questions, this is the appropriate time. Let me start with this lady back here.
Hi, last year I thought there was some indication from the city that the square footage is 1,200 and not 800. I guess it's evolved somewhat. Can you clarify that?
So the 1,200 square foot is the max allowed by state law. But there's a minimum that you have to allow, which is 800 square foot detached unit. So that's the difference.
So what does it mean from working with the city, you want to do more than 800, etc.?
We would have to work with you in terms of making sure you haven't maxed out the overall lot coverage and square footage. So.
Okay, thank you. There's a question back here.
Hi, just 2 quick questions. One is, do you know when the timing might be that the city adopts the ordinance? And second, what is the impact fee if you build over 750 square feet in Los Altos for a detached ADU?
I don't have the exact impact fees. I can certainly get your name and we can calculate that. The city does have an adopted master fee schedule, which shows all of the impact fees. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I can certainly get those for you. And also in terms of ordinance adoption. So March 24th, we're hoping to go to Planning Commission, and the second meeting in April with first City Council will be
Over here.
It's March 19th.
March 19th.
So there's, if you were looking to put up this 800 square foot ADU, which you're now permitted to have, there's a couple of other things which might be preventing that. There's a daylight plane rule, and there's a separation rule. So are these rules now still effective, or are they null and void for the person who wants to now put that by right 800 square foot? ADU?
So AB 68 covers that. So just to make it, very, what the term is from the state, very restrictive or whatnot, they specifically wrote into the legislation, the cities do have the right to regulate the setbacks and the height and whatnot, but you can't do so in such a way that you would not allow someone to get an 800 square foot. So the daylight plane currently in the ordinance is void. And so that'll be something, if the city council wants to modify that to be in conformance with state law, that'll have to be open for discussion.
And what about the 10-foot separation?
Here's mine.
And what about the 10-foot separation from the
The
existing house?
10-foot,
Guido, hold on a second. I've been asked to reframe the question because people are having trouble hearing in the back. I forgot the question already.
Okay, so the existing ordinance says that if you put up an ADU, it has to be 10 feet from your house from any vertical member. That includes like arbors or something like that, which would definitely prohibit anything in my backyard, for example. So is that still effective, or is it not?
so as of January 1st, the city's ADU ordinance is null and void. We have a legal opinion from our city attorney to that effect. If the 10-foot separation from your house prohibits the development of at least an 800 square foot ADU, we will have to modify that for you.
There's a question here. There haven't been any questions on the other side of the room. I'm just checking. All right, let me take this gentleman, then we'll go over there and go back.
Does the state ordinance say anything about whether you can have gas in the ADU?
Yes, that's more of a reach
The
code.
question whether the state ordinance says anything about whether you can have gas in your ADU.
Good evening, I'm John Biggs, the Community Development Director for the City of Los Altos. Right now, our regulations do permit for gas. However, our Environmental Commission is developing what we refer to as a reach code ordinance, which would require all electric appliances in any new construction. So,
What about heat?
even the heat for the home would have to be done by an electric appliance.
Okay, over here.
Guido, would you explain the difference between an attached ADU and a JDU?
Sure.
So people understand?
The question was to clarify the distinction between a detached ADU and a
No, attached.
attached ADU and a junior ADU.
So the attached is just merely that, it's attached to the property. The junior ADU, according to the state legislation, has to be within the confines of the house, and can be no more than 500 square feet. And there's some other more technical stuff we can go over, but that's the general premise. So.
Okay, over here is a question back here. Did you have a question? Yes.
Can an ADU be attached to the outside of a garage?
Sure, why not?
The question
As long as
was,
you meet the
can an
requirements.
ADU be attached to the outside of the garage?
Sure.
So it's kind of like a attached garage and converted for ADU, right?
Can you repeat that question?
So her question for the benefit of the audience was, can you convert a garage to an ADU? Yes, you can. And the state specifically said if you convert that garage, the city can't ask for parking, for replacement parking.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Good evening. You said a junior ADU would be approved within 60 days. How about a regular detached ADU? What is your timeline and expectation?
So we'll clarify that. So 60 days from a completed application. And very few customers have a completed application. You know, we have very onerous building and other codes. So it might, so it's 60 days from when you have a complete set of plans and all the requirements. So.
Junior or detached, doesn't matter.
Yes.
Okay, another question in the back.
Can you clarify if if a garage is converted into an ADU, you get the parking exception. If you convert the garage into a junior ADU, Do you get the parking exception, and is that within the confines of the house?
That I'd have to research a little bit more and get back to you on that one. I don't believe they envision, because it said within the confines of the house.
Okay, one more question back here, and then we'll head back forward.
What are going to be the regulations? Right now, for example, if you put a shed close to a property line, will you be able to put an ADU right next to the property line?
No, I mean, the state law is a minimum of 4 feet away from the side and rear of a property line. So you're not going to be able to put one right on the property line. However, there's a caveat. If you have a legally recognized accessory structure that has less than the 4-foot setback, and you can prove to the city that that was built, you can build the ADU where it is. So.
Okay, question over here, and then over there.
Yeah, my question is about the lot coverage. Can you explain? I have a client that wants to add on 700 square feet in the main house and wants to put a junior ADU attached to the existing house, and also wants to add an ADU in the back, in the rear of the property that's 500 square feet. How do you feel about that?
So this has come up a couple times at the front counter. People have asked this question. So it's a little more of a nuanced answer. So the junior ADU has to be within the confines of the existing house. Now, the question came up, well, what happens if I add on to my property and then after the fact apply for the junior ADU? Potentially that's a possibility. But for now, for that 700 square foot addition, that could not be the junior ADU because it's not within the confines of the existing house.
Okay, so
One
either
quick
you do
question.
the junior ADU
Okay,
or you do the addition of 700 square feet. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
If you happen to have an empty seat next to you, if you could raise your hand, there are more folks standing in the back. So if you'd like a seat, this is your opportunity. Here in the front row for the next question.
We've talked a lot about garage conversions. Let's assume that a garage is 400 square feet. Can somebody add 800 square feet to the garage and then call it convert it into a junior ADU?
Well, it's the same scenario. If you add on to the property, so his question was, can you add on to the garage as part of a junior ADU? And it's the same scenario where, I mean, you would have to, it has to be within the confines of the house, but once again, the question came up, well, couldn't I just add on to my house, get it finalized by the city, and then go back and make it a junior ADU? Theoretically, yes.
All right, this question over here.
Yeah, what is the requirement for a JDU? Does it have to have bathrooms, kitchen?
Yes, they actually wrote that into the law. And for those who don't have the handout that we prepared, we had it on the back table. So this is the handout that the planning department prepared. In terms of the requirements for the junior ADU, the maximum size is 500 square feet. You must have cooking facilities with appliances. There must be a deed restriction with the junior ADU, indicating the property owner will live in one of the 2 units. So these are some of the other, we have more, you have the handout.
All right, here, and then there's a gentleman here.
Can cities impose a parking requirement for a new detached ADU?
Yes. One covered space. One covered or uncovered space.
That includes, do they have to be independently, like can they be in series?
So his question was, can we impose a parking requirement for a detached unit? The answer is yes. And then what can it be, covered or uncovered? So they actually wrote that into the law. You can have it be 2 independent parking spaces, or they can be tandem, which is basically back-to-back parking.
Okay,
if my neighbor has a storage attached to the fence, and there's no 4 feet or no nothing, can I attach the unit to the fence too?
The question was if a neighbor has a shed that's attached to the fence, can he put his ADU next to the fence?
So, the state law says the minimum you have to be is 4 feet away. So you wouldn't be able to attach your ADU to the fence. So.
You said unless there is another.
The caveat was, but it doesn't apply to you because it had to have already been there. We had to have legally recognized it. It had to be in existence as of, say, January 1st. But that's not the case in the scenario that you painted, because the scenario that you painted was that you would be adding on as of, say, tomorrow. So it wasn't in existence as of, say, January 1st.
So Guido, back here is a gentleman with a question.
So I have recently had two clients in Palo Alto, one that did a junior ADU and one who did a full ADU. And the question that came up when doing so is the junior ADU was able to be connected to the primary residence's heating system, water, utilities, but the full ADU not only had to have its own heating system, but its own water, heat, electric, as well as a firewall separation that separated the full ADU unit from the living space, similar to as if you had multiple housing. Is that a building department question, or is that something that you have knowledge about?
I'm so glad you asked, because Kirk, our building official, is in the back, so that might be a building official question.
Just remember, folks, you'll have time when we're doing roundtables to ask city staff lots more questions. Sure. Yeah, and you can play Stump the Planner, so it's a good game. Over here.
So for the junior ADU, or say I have a detached garage, when you convert that detached garage into a full ADU, you obviously are taking over the one covered parking space that is required currently. You're saying that the city does not require that you build a new one with one covered parking if you convert your 400 square foot garage into an ADU, am I right?
That is correct, but you actually brought up a really important point that needs to be addressed, that even if the state says we can't make you put in that replacement parking, if you try to then add on to the house, now you're in conflict with the parking requirements for the city. So it's a little bit of a dance in terms of we're trying to comply with state law, which says you can't put in the replacement parking, but if you try to do something later down the road, there's some conflict there.
Guido, I have a question back here.
So I have a current setback of 25 feet to the rear. So with an attached ADU, is that waived and it's down to 4 feet?
So state law says you can have a 4-foot setback for the detached ADU. Detached. Attached, you would generally follow the setbacks of the house.
How about the rental restriction for ADU?
Rental restriction?
30 days minimum.
30 days.
Yeah, you cannot do short-term rentals for the ADUs.
I have a question. This appears that now every property could be 3-family. Will Los Altos have any single-family properties?
Well, that's unfortunately a question you're going to have to take up with your state assemblyman and state senator. This is, one of the crux of being a city planner is we enforce what the state gives us. And so this is.
I'm not suggesting it's your fault, I'm just curious.
Yeah, and so this is the crux of the matter. This is why there's obviously concern. But yeah, definitely contact your state assemblyman, state senator, because we're merely trying to implement the legislation adopted.
Okay, we have a question in the back here.
You brought up a good point about the future parking replacement. So if you add on this 800 square foot, for how long will that be exempt? And can you then add on to your main house up to the FAR? And at some point, will that apply to your FAR in the future, affecting?
So
do you have any
there's two
discussion?
questions there.
Yeah.
So I was addressing the potential scenario of I have a detached garage in the back, and I converted it, so now I don't have the required parking as required by the Los Altos code. That was the inconsistency there. In terms of the FAR, going over what's currently allowed to go over, unless there's a change in state law, that's what we'll be implementing moving forward.
Is there anyone who hasn't asked a question yet who has one? All right, let me take that gentleman and then we'll go around for seconds.
Okay, if you have a flag lot, I know flag lots typically have different rules. Does everything in here apply the same to a flag lot as other
The
lots?
setbacks, yes. I don't know if I fully thought through in terms of, obviously we wouldn't want you building on the flag portion of the lot. In terms of the FAR, we wouldn't count the flag part as part of the lot size. In terms of, the setbacks are kind of in the state law. The height is in the state law. So I'd have to give it a little bit more thought, but I mean, at least where the building envelope is, you should be covered.
Okay, I have another question. What are the permit fees for an ADU that's about 500 square feet and one that is 800 square feet? Would you be able to tell us that?
I could certainly pull that up off the master fee schedule.
You don't?
I don't have it off the top of my head.
Approximately.
Well, there are planning fees, there's building fees, there's also, if you do choose to have separate utilities for the ADU, so there's quite a myriad of different fees. So if you Google 21 Elements, if you want to Google that, it's a group of planning directors for San Mateo County. They've actually created a calculator to figure out how much an ADU would cost generally within the region, and they actually break it down by different levels of construction in terms of quality and size. So you can go to the 21 Elements website to get a better calculator for an ADU generally in the area.
Some people, you may have come across this, some people have built illegal structures, non-permitted structures that somebody's living in. What does the process of an ADU amnesty program look like, and what are the various steps?
Amnesty. I'm trying to get out of here alive. So, so let's talk about, so they actually wrote into one of the laws that if you have I don't like to use the term illegal because that's offensive to people, we'll say unpermitted structure, the city actually has to go through a process to work with the property owner to assess what part of the building really needs to be brought up to code, because they actually wrote into one of the state laws that there potentially could be up to a 5-year deferment for certain building code or planning violations that don't meet the requirement. But that would be a process that we would undertake with the building official to ascertain, because at the end of the day, our primary job is to keep the public safe. And so we do not want to approve construction that puts the community or your family or your children in harm's way.
Yeah, so is basement allowed
for the detached ADU, and if it is, or if it's, does it have to be included in the 800 square feet?
It does have to be included. The current ordinance, which is null and void, does allow for basements. That's not something I've dug deeply into. I'll have to research that a little bit more in terms of what's the will of the city council for that.
We're getting a little close on time. You haven't asked a question yet, have you, sir? No, all right. This lady and then that gentleman.
So I'm not too familiar, so maybe everybody knows this. If you have a house that has the right square footage and you rent that out, what's the advantage of calling it a JDU as opposed to just saying you're going to rent 2 rooms and blah, blah?
Well, no one stops you from renting out, barring the ordinance about less than 30 days in terms of short-term rental. You have that right as a property owner.
Okay, but not long-term.
Yeah, you do have a.
So my understanding, you can correct me, John, you can't do a short-term rental here of less than 30 days.
Right.
Oh, I see.
Minimum.
But what's the advantage to the property owner to call it an ADU or JDU?
Well, I mean, that's what's the advantage, her question was, what's the advantage of calling it a junior ADU versus a rental? I mean, theoretically, if you have a junior ADU as part of your house that's walled off, that gives somebody privacy, that gives them opportunity to have separate cooking facilities, if your children come back from college, or you have somebody who's elderly and maybe needs a little bit of care, but they still want their privacy, this is an opportunity for you to help serve your family and your family members. So.
Gentleman here who has not asked a question.
Okay. I have an existing ADU that was permitted about 25 years ago. It is, its setbacks from property lines are less than the new numbers. Would that create any issues with permitting a remodel?
Well, so that's a confluence of 2 of the state laws. So we were talking about potential code violations and how we address that. So if is it less than the 4 feet?
Yes.
Okay. But it's a legally recognized structure from the city's perspective.
Yes.
I'm ascertaining from your scenario. Then potentially we would have to work with you in terms of the one specific bill, which I did not put on the slide, to ascertain what percentage of the ADU could be modified so you're not triggering the non-conforming ordinance. So that's a little bit more of a detailed question. I can certainly work with you on that.
So we are sort of past time. You'll be able to ask your questions of the planners during the tabling session after the next panel. So what we'd like to do is take a short 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 7 and we will begin the second panel. And thank you, Guido.
Can I just, so we have a really awesome staff.
They did a good job.
We just want to,
Yes.
So so can the city planners and the city employees stand up? We have a really awesome planning team. Steve, Ellie, Kelly, Anthony's also here. They can also answer some of your questions. We're really fortunate to have them here. They know the ordinances inside and out. And we have our chief building official here as well. So please ask them questions. That's why they're here. And we're really fortunate to have them working for the city. So.
And then after the panelists' comments, we will have time for questions. Again, not specifically about your individual situation, but more questions about the general topic that each of these folks represents. So I won't go into all the details of their resume, which is on, they've been taking notes copiously as you've been asking questions. Fathia McCauley, did I get it right? Yay. From the Housing Trust of Silicon Valley. They are involved with financing housing throughout our area. Greg Popovich, who is a builder. You live in Los Altos, don't you? No, you do, okay. Ron, and Greg's construction company does sort of stick-built, conventional construction. Next to Greg is John Geary, and his company specializes in pre-fab accessory dwelling units. And lastly, we have Jessica Remini, whose firm really designs mostly or exclusively ADUs. So with that, I will turn it over to the panelists. Where should we start? John?
I was going to go first.
Okay.
All right.
There you go.
Is he on the 5-minute rule?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody's
So-
on the 5-minute rule.
Gary gets to time me. Good evening, everyone. How are you this evening? Thank you very much for coming out this evening. It's nice to see all these faces that are interested in accessory dwelling units. Our economic development director asked me to remind everyone that you can't have ADU units without use. So it's good to see so many people from Los Altos here looking at accessory dwelling structures. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what Guido shared this evening. I think he did a great job, and I don't want to contradict anything he shared with you this evening. But we rewrote our accessory dwelling unit regulations about a year and 6 months ago, and here we are today looking at all of the state rules and regulations and the changes that have been made and trying to put together this whole mishmash of laws that the state has come up with and developing a set of codes that the city can adopt and be in compliance with what the wishes are of the citizens of Los Altos, but also the state regulations. And it's really been a bit of a challenge. We're still looking at the regulations as of even this afternoon. There were questions that we were asking one another in preparation for our meeting this evening regarding some of the aspects of the state law. In fact, I think Guido mentioned that he was at a recent planning directors meeting not too long ago where there was even disagreement amongst planning directors about what some of the new state mandates were. So we're trying our best to get these laws updated to give you clear and accurate information. And I think the benefit really this evening for all of you that have specific questions about properties where you're thinking of adding your accessory dwelling unit is that, as Guido noted, we do have our planning department staff here. I think they all stood up a minute ago to raise their hands and introduce themselves, and our chief building official. So after this panel discussion, I think it's going to be a very good opportunity for you to sit down with the members of the planning department and ask questions about your particular circumstances and what you would like to accomplish. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to, early in the process, even when you just got this little idea in your mind that you'd like to construct an accessory dwelling unit, come in and meet with the planning staff and talk about your property, the size of your lot, where on the property you might be considering putting in an accessory dwelling unit. And, excuse me, they can really guide you well in terms of what you'll be able to do. Because, as you heard earlier, the state is allowing for accessory dwelling units on basically all single-family residential lots and a lot of multifamily residential zone districts here in Los Altos. Again, you can have an accessory dwelling unit up to 800 square feet, and we can't apply our floor area ratio requirements, our lot coverage requirements, our design review requirements, and there are some specific requirements that the state has incorporated in terms of how close that accessory dwelling unit can be to the side property line or the rear property line. And for junior accessory dwelling units, those again have to be created within the existing living space of a dwelling, and they can't be more than 500 square feet. And you can have both that accessory dwelling unit and that junior accessory dwelling unit. So there is, as somebody mentioned, or asked a question about, there is an opportunity for 3 separate dwelling units on a single-family dwelling site. The zone districts are still single-family residential. R1 single-family uses are the really permitted use on the site. In fact, the state, way back a long time ago when it was adopting its rules and regulations, and when it first went into this set of standards that said a city could not use any discretion in the review. We couldn't require some type of architectural approval or use permit process to allow accessory dwelling units. It said that a home with an accessory dwelling unit is still a single-family residential use. So again, we have our planning staff here this evening. Again, I'm going to emphasize that you, if you're thinking about doing an ADU, come in and talk to the planners, talk to one of the building inspectors. We can give you more detailed information. We do have handouts at the back of the room. And again, thank you very much. We'll be available for questions at the end of the meeting.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Fathia McCauley, and I'm the Chief Lending Officer with Housing Trust Silicon Valley. So, does anybody know what is...
Stand, can you see her in the back?
Can you see me? Oh.
There you go.
So I'm just curious, does anyone know what a CDFI is? Community, Julie does. Julie, our CFO and resident of Los Altos, knows. Anyone else know what a CDFI is? One other hand. Okay. We're a community development financial institution. There are about so it means that we're a non-bank bank. And so this designation comes out of the U.S. Department of Treasury. And a lot of the loans that we make and CDFIs like us, there, like I said, there are about 1,100 across the U.S., maybe 130 that are here located in California. We have the largest concentration because California's got a lot of stuff going on. But one of the things that we do collectively as financial institutions is we make loans that really aren't actually available out there. So Sue has been gracious enough to ask Housing Trust to come and talk a little bit about our construction financing program. I did have a presentation, but I'm not going to go through every single slide, but I will give you some highlights about us, talk about our program, and then hopefully later if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So Housing Trust operates in the 13-county Bay Area, so that is all the way from San Benito, Monterey, all the way up to Marin, Sonoma, Napa, and I would say as far east as San Joaquin, so certainly a big swath of area. And so our area, why we're interested in ADUs, why are you interested in ADUs? We're interested because we see ADUs as a way to expand the availability of affordable housing for many, many people. And single-family residential, at this point, it's not necessarily affordable for all, but certainly if you're building an ADU, that creates an additional unit that we have creatively figured out a way to offer financing to increase the amount of affordable units. So again, our impact, we've been around since 2000. We have invested probably over 300 million, and that has yielded well over 10,000 affordable housing homes. We've probably helped about 40,000 people and well over 6,800 homeowners. So as the Chief Lending Officer, I have 3 different departments that are under me. I have an accessory dwelling units department. We do multifamily loans. If you've heard of low-income housing tax credits, we provide pre-development loans for them. And also we have a first-time homebuyer program that provides down payment assistance, and that's in partnership with the County of Santa Clara. So our program is called Small Homes, Big Impact, and one of the things that we see that's really important for us is education. So we do quarterly live educational workshops for homeowners, and we bring in a team of experts where you can ask questions. So you can talk to an architect, you can talk to a designer, you can talk to a contractor, and the whole idea is how do you get an idea of how to build an ADU that's right for you, or get the resources, or kind of point you in some direction. We don't have all the answers, but certainly the point of the workshops is to, as a nonprofit, is to make sure that we have information that's available for everyone. So we also provide resources, we have open house tours, and we have an ROI calculator that I think that we're probably going to be rolling out sometime in the spring. So we have our own ADU financing initiative. So I've been calling it our construction loan program. We have 2 staff that very exciting. One staff member is coming on board on Monday, and she's going to be our mortgage loan originator who will be making loans to individuals, maybe yourself actually. So we are looking at a construction loan program, and it's created in a very unique way. So we got a grant from Chase, Pro Neighborhoods, and one of the things was how can we create accessory dwelling units, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? The lack of financing that's available for an accessory dwelling unit, an unproven rental income unit that a lot of banks are shying away from, quite frankly. Not to knock anyone, but it's not your traditional financing mechanism because the rent isn't proven. It's an additional unit and you're asking for more money on a finite valued home. So how do we do that? The way that we've structured this is to kind of solve the problem. So we hope that you'll talk to us and we can see, yes, we did solve the problem. So at this point, what we're offering is, and again, this program is going to be rolled out in the spring. We have a new staff member who will be originating loans. I would probably say give us about 60 days or less, and then hopefully we'll be able to roll them out, but we're ready to talk with you today if you're interested. So we are offering a second position mortgage that would be up to $200,000. Oh, that's time? That's time?
Yes, time.
Okay, well, it's 36 months term. We can give you more information afterwards. And I did have some flyers, so if you got it, just come to the table later and we'll talk a little bit more. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Greg Popovich with Goldbar Builders, and it's nice to see everyone here tonight. I see a lot of happy faces that I've met over the last year and look forward to helping to serve you and enjoy what I'm doing here. How we started in ADUs. We do custom-built design all the way through construction ADUs. And how we started was both me and one of my partners, Dave Madsen, were turning 57 years old. We decided that since we've done everything from industrial condominiums to 22,000 square foot custom homes to anything in between, hotels, motels, strip centers, different things like that, that we would start to give back. And so what we've done is we've started to do an ADU company. Started it back in October 2016, prior to all these laws taking effect, because we saw an opportunity to help bring housing to the Silicon Valley, which is definitely lacking. In the design to build part of our company, we go all the way from designing the unit, helping you design it to your specifications. Coming on site, we do what's called site built construction. Come on site, we build usually 2x6 construction, 2x6 framing, build them on site and have it to where you're able to go back and have the house match the main house and have it designed to your needs. So it works out very well. Our biggest job lately has been to help navigate the maze of laws that have come down. I don't envy John or anybody that is in the planning and entitlement phases and building. Kirk back in the back we've met today. It's amazing what they have to go through yearly to try to keep up with the new laws and new regulations. So that's where I come in. I give seminars on the laws and regulations, and I also am able to do that. So usually my seminars are up to 2 hours. So it's going to be difficult in 5 minutes. So what we do is we look at the laws, we analyze the laws, we see what works for you, what works in your yard. We look at some of the challenges that you'll be presented with. A number of the challenges, even though you're hearing 4-foot setbacks, you're hearing all these different things, and it sounds so wonderful. Well, there's also things called easements. And if you have an easement in your backyard, say a 10-foot easement, you're not going to be able to build in that 4-foot setback. So there's things that come up that you need to know about or need to be aware of that you're not necessarily aware of as things come. We advocate on your behalf, go and look at your properties, make sure that you're able to sit there and to do what you want to do. And then we go and we start the design phase based on what the rules, the laws, the regulations are. There's other things that are underlying with building ADUs. There's seismic hazard, there's geological hazards, there's fault lines. There's any number of things that come up that you need to be aware of that can help hinder the process of building an ADU. And sometimes it takes a lot longer than 60 days to get things approved, as we've been finding in Los Altos. But we've met and we're actually working towards accomplishing this in a lot faster time frames and get the ADU on your property. Once we're on site, that's the fun part, because we build in 90 to 120 days. So 120 days afterwards, expect to have the keys to your brand new ADU so that you can move in. We build anywhere from standard ADUs, which is something that's very nice. If you go on our website, at goldbarbuilders.com. Go into the news section, you'll see photos of some of the completed units. None of those have upgrades. They're all standard units for us. We can go all the way to custom if you need or if you'd like. And our specialty is to build 500 to 1,200 square foot ADUs detached. We do attached ADUs, we do garage conversions, but Silicon Valley Housing Trust actually had me write an article for them about garage conversions. And the garage conversion sometimes is much more expensive than tearing down the garage and to put a new one up. So it's, there's a number of things. They were built basically to house cars, not people. So there's a number of things that go with that. I've got one, thank you. Some of the different things that come up on challenges of the fire departments and things like that, we can talk about that more later in your individual needs and things. And basically, to wrap it all up real quick, I'm not used to these times, is whatever you need, give me a call. We can talk about it. There's no charge for anybody that's here tonight to have us do a consult. We'll talk about your project. You go to our website, fill out the contact. That'll give me your property information. I'll do much of the research before I even call you. So once you hear from me, we'll be able to talk very diligently about your property. I've already Google Earthed it. I've already looked at a lot of the easements. I've already looked at a number of things that you need to know about. So we can have that, and that's absolutely no charge. But feel free to call me. Feel free to go to the website and see what we do. And that's all I have time for. Please come up and visit with me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight to talk about ADUs with some folks that do a lot of thinking about ADUs. My name is John Geary. I'm here with Abodu. I do something very similar to Greg, except I build your ADU offsite instead of in your backyard. I actually was born and raised in Cupertino, and I think to myself, wow, how am I ever going to buy a house over here? Tough. I like to think ADUs are helping contribute to that problem, adding a bit more housing stock, making it easier for multi-generational families on properties to actually utilize their space. So thus comes Abodu and prefabricated ADUs. Let me start by talking a little bit more about prefabricated ADUs in a whole. Prefab is a big word. There's a lot of different ways to do prefabricated ADUs or homes or structures. It can be entirely built off-site, where you think an entire fully completed structure arrives at your front door and is craned into your backyard. It can be panelized, where different portions of the building are actually built off-site, brought on-site, but then you still have to go through the traditional kind of on-site construction process. And those are kind of the two main ways. Pros and cons of each. They both allow quite a bit of speed and take some of the construction process out of your backyard, but they do both sacrifice some customization. So that's a key thing to remember with prefabrication is typically your structure is set. You can customize some of your exterior siding, your roofing, your windows, things like that. A lot of the finishes inside, but you're going to be hard-pressed to move windows or walls throughout. However, with that customization comes quite a bit of known factors. One is pretty good grasp on costs. You're going to go into a prefabricated project with a pretty dang good understanding of what this project is going to cost you because we do it every single week in factory. We know exactly what our costs are and we can pass those through to you. Another big one is time savings. You don't have all the construction process happening in your backyard. So what that actually does is we take that same construction method that you would see with a typical site build. We do it underneath a factory's roof instead of in your backyard. We take care of the foundation, the utilities, all the hookups that's needed for an ADU, and then we deliver the completed unit to your home. So those are kind of the pros and cons of working with a prefabricated builder. Speaking a little bit more about Abodu, we only have two models, 500 square foot and a 335 square foot. So we're not going to be able to tackle your custom work like Greg might be able to do for you here. And ours are on the smaller side. We have had to design our models around what will fit in most backyards. So an 800 square foot ADU, a little bit out of our scope. 1,200 square foot ADU, definitely out of our scope. But a 500 square foot or 330, right in our wheelhouse and something that we can move really quickly with you to achieve. And so to put some little guardrails around what does quick mean, just 2 weeks ago, we delivered 2 homes, one on a Tuesday, one on a Thursday, both permitted in the first week of December. So less than 2.5 months from permit to actually installing the homes, handing over the keys to the homeowner. That's very quick. And on a very tight, conformed project budget. They knew exactly what they were paying going into the project. So that's some of the pros of prefabricated ADUs. One thing I would caution you when thinking about prefabricated ADUs is there's a lot of providers out there that build to two different types of code. So if I leave you one thing about prefabricated ADUs, it's the two different types of code, which I know is really interesting and super fun, and you guys are definitely going to remember this when you leave tonight. There's HUD code and HCD code. HUD code is not built to California building code. It is built to a federal guideline and is a questionable form of building when it comes to actually installing a unit on your site in California. Planners and builders from the city departments will mention this to you, but oftentimes it's tough to find that information on what the differences is. The other piece is HCD. HCD is a California state organization that approves plans and inspects units being constructed in factory. That means your unit is being built to California building code, California energy code, and is fully compliant with any structure that you would be building in your backyard already. So I do caution you to ask those questions of your prefabricated builder before you dive headfirst into a project. Fair warning, we are a relatively new company, as is most prefabricated builders. We haven't been building for 30 years like Greg has, right? We don't have that long distance experience of building ADUs, but we've partnered with factories that have been building for decades. Even though we're a new company, we're seeing a lot of folks get really excited about the prefabricated process and being able to take a lot of that construction out of their backyard. So for even a new company, we're doing 12 projects right now across the Bay Area, have multiple units installed, multiple coming the next month or so here. So I do push you to ask those questions of your builders of, how are you building these, what's the code standard, and how quickly and transparently can you do it for me? And I'm going to stop before my 5 minutes are up.
Well done.
Hi, my name is Jessica Remini, and I have ADU Collective, and I'm just so excited to be here. I truly love what I do, and I think all these people do. It feels really good to be up here with you guys. You guys have so many options at your fingertips. Design build, prefab. There's a ton of architects out there that are specializing in ADUs. ADU Collective, as the name suggests, is sort of mission driven, right? It's a collective of all these little housing units or spread development solving a pretty big housing crisis. So that to me feels really awesome, and I think if any of you are considering this, you can give yourself a pat on the back as well, because that is great. The other really exciting news is that it's a win for all of you. So that's what the beauty of the ADU is that everyone truly can win. The housing, it brings flexibility to your life, and so it's just a really exciting time to be part of this. So ADU Collective is basically the cities, the owner, and the community working together to solve this housing crisis. And so why you might come to ADU Collective rather than maybe a prefab solution, because I actually completely believe in the future of the prefab solution. So hopefully we're all moving in that direction. With this spread infill development, it starts to get a little more complicated and can get a little sticky. So if if you go to an architect, hopefully if your project makes sense to do prefab, you definitely should do that. But like Greg was saying, there's all sorts of little nuances. Every property is different. So when I start a project, I basically throw away any preconceived notions for the most part, and basically we go on this problem-solving journey together. So we would go down to the building department, ask the questions, always start there, and take really good notes, follow up with the name, email, confirm, because these rules are changing, and that can be really heartbreaking. I actually sent an email today to the city of Palo Alto saying, I think I'm gonna cry if we can't, can we stick to something here with this as they're defining it? So the good news is, in the next couple months, all of these rules, I think, are gonna get solidified. We'll have clear direction. Poor staff has been trying to navigate this mandate, but also this really exciting time. What makes ADU Collective different is that from maybe a traditional architecture firm is that I did my first couple ADUs, 2008, 10, 11, and I was like, there's something here. These are just so fun. For one, they're not somebody's main home that they need to have Thanksgiving in, next Thanksgiving. So you can have a little bit of fun with it. Take your time, think about it. It's gonna create this whole other flexibility in your life. So ADU Collective, so then I decided to just streamline and focus on this. So basically it's mass customization. So my product, actually, the prefab component of what streamlines our process is the production drawings. So I have a set of drawings that's all tailored for all the specifications for ADUs. We take your custom design, put that into the drawings, and generate it. So that's sort of my, angle for streamlining the process. And so my favorite part is working with the homeowner to problem solve their little niche market and getting their niche site and getting the most out of every inch. So I just think that's so fun, and so hopefully you guys enjoy that on your process. So what else do we do? So I use Hover, which is 3D software imaging, so we can generate your any existing structures automatically in 3D. Then we generate the design in 3D. We use Asana, which is project management, so you guys are brought along on the time, on the scheduling. I do a lot of remote video meetings and sharing of screens if that's something that you guys are interested in, because one of the hardest things I find in projects is scheduling time to actually meet and check in and have regular meetings, especially in this area. So anyway, that is ADU Collective, and I'm really excited for you guys. The biggest thing, so there's a flyer, I think, that I always really try to let people know is you are building a house. So when you're setting out on this, just remember that to set reasonable expectations when you start this. And so on the back of my flyer is some estimated costs. Please don't hold me to them. But you can see all the line items involved, because there are a lot of line items. It is a mini house. So with that, we're here to answer questions, and thank you all for considering this.
5 minutes, not enough time, huh? So let's ask questions. These are, again, clarifying questions, not necessarily geared to your specific property or the project that you've been thinking about. And then after we answer those questions, we'll adjourn, and you can ask these folks all of your individual questions or things about your property. So let me start right here.
So I have two questions that haven't been brought up, which is, first of all, what happens to your property tax when you put an ADU on your property? That's question number one. Then for Kirk, or for John, Kirk being our building official, someone should talk about the fact that if you have an ADU in the back of a 100-foot deep lot and your sewer system is going out the front of your lot, and you're not allowed to tie into the house's sewer system, do people realize that they're going to have a pump system, and it's going to run the entire length of their lot to reach the street, and what that does to costs? But Kirk said he had a solution for the sewer. We'll let him talk, but why doesn't someone up there talk about property taxes?
Anyone?
You want to use one of those? There you go.
Once again, Greg Popovich, Goldbar Builders. I did a seminar with Mr. Stone, the assessor for Santa Clara County. And what I understand, and you need to verify this with your accountant and also with the city and the county, is that the property tax, say it was a $200,000 bill or a $300,000 bill, what they'll do is they'll add that amount onto your property tax bill. So if your property tax bill is based on when you bought the house for $27,000, you now be assessed at $327,000. So that's my understanding. It's not reassessed. Your property is not reassessed, but the amount that you're adding to your property is now added onto your property tax bill, and then it's calculated off of the new number versus off of the old number that you bought the home for.
Okay, Bill, who's going to tackle the sewer issue? John?
Yes, I'll give it my best, but we do have our building official here if I get this wrong. But as Mrs. Bresic brings up, she points out that if you do construct an accessory dwelling unit, you do need a separate lateral that goes from that unit to the main sewer line. And depending on where that accessory dwelling unit is located, you are going to have to trench out to that main sewer line. So that's a cost, similar to a cost that Mr. Popovich brought up regarding converting a garage into an accessory dwelling unit. That's one thing you need to be mindful of. And it's nice to have this group and this panel up here this evening because they have experience in doing a lot of things like this and experience in running into those costs that you, maybe as a homeowner not familiar with the building or construction trades, will run into unexpectedly.
Okay, other questions?
So we keep talking about cost, but we kind of dance around it. What does it cost? $500 a square foot, more or less? Can you give me any ballparks?
So what's difficult here is we're used to quantifying construction per square foot, and you really can't do that with these structures because you have all the same parts of a house, but then you don't have the larger square footage to spread that out over. So I'm really interested in the Santa Clara 21 elements. So that seems like a really great place to start. I also have on my website and on the back of the flyer, and I'm seeing a conversion costing $170,000, maybe more, easily, to $300,000 for a new ADU. And definitely what I find is hardly anybody just does that project. So usually then there's the kitchen remodel that has to happen, and so then it starts to snowball into a bigger project. So I think if you can just be mindful, once you start this, that it's kind of can become expensive unless you're really, really mindful.
I think it's also important to add that the cost of the project determines on your current site infrastructure. Yeah. If you have an old electric panel that's built in the 70s, you're going to have to upgrade that. If you have really an old sewer line that needs to be upgraded as well, you're going to have to upgrade that. There's things that you uncover in an ADU project which you aren't really excited or expecting that do pop up all the time. So having an understanding of your current infrastructure is really important to understand what your all-in cost is going to be.
And another thing on the cost is that a standard ADU is quite a bit different than custom. Your cost can go up significantly just by adding a different cabinetry set or different flooring, or if you want bamboo or special exotic woods, or if you just want to go with some standard vinyl plank flooring. It really depends on the customization level as to what you're looking at on a square foot basis. Our cottages backyard detached cottages started in the mid 190s. But that's at a 500 square foot unit. But there's also things that go on top of that, permits, fees. We have an allowance for tie-ins. In Los Altos, our allowance would not be enough. We have a $4,000 allowance. When you do tie into the lateral in the front yard, you have a number of things that come into play as well. Saw cutting. You're going to be saw cutting through driveways, through walkways, through your stones that you just had placed, your landscaping. There's a number of costs that come in to play over and above the construction cost. So it's really difficult to put a square footage price on it. Sorry about that, Gary, but to put a square footage price onto a unit that has so many variables. And the other variables that come in is sometimes, I'll share this one real quick, is we're doing an ADU currently in Los Altos. And Santa Clara County Fire is making us fire sprinkle the unit, even though it says in the state statutes that you do not need to sprinkle a unit. In Los Altos, you have a unique situation here that the Santa Clara County Fire Department makes you measure from center line of street to the back of the ADU. If you're over 200 feet from the center line of the street to the furthest most part of the ADU, going the furthest route around, you must sprinkle your ADU, which means that you now have more engineering, you have fire sprinklers, you have to upgrade your meter. We're upgrading, in this particular instance, upgrading the meter to a 1 inch. We're upgrading the main line to 1.5 inches. So there's a number of costs that come in that are unexpected that come during the planning phase. That was completely unexpected because most of the other cities and other areas, in the exception of the county, this isn't a Los Altos thing, this is a Santa Clara County fire that covers Los Altos. They go from center line. Most cities and counties go from curb. So in Los Altos, you have the center line of the street to the side of the street, and then you have a distance to your property line, And by the time you're done, you've already gone through 45 feet before you even get to your property. So there are these unknown costs that come in, and that's why you truly need an advocate and someone that's done this over and over again to try and go on your behalf to try to help mitigate and navigate through these mazes. The thing is that sometimes they pop up when you don't expect them. And even I can't tell you every single one that's going to pop up during the planning and the building phase. So it's something that we go through together, and with the understanding that these things may pop up and there may be some potential things that come that are not associated with your ADU that are requirements.
I have two questions. Number one is soil investigation. What's the requirement on soil investigation, and if there are ways to save on that? For example, if an adjacent neighbor did their house recently, can I use their report? Number one. Number two is I understand from that middle gentleman, the reassessment is not going to happen. So, but the increase in value is based on construction cost. I would like to confirm that. Would that include the engineering cost and design cost? Thank you.
Well, to answer the question about the soils, it kind of depends on the location of your property and the soils that are there, the size of the unit, whether or not there is a slope to the property, the foundation system that you're developing, the type of framing that is being used. And we can, after the panel discussion and the question and answers here, we can meet with the building official and get some more clarification on that.
They are public record, yes. Not necessarily, no.
Ask the building official back there. He's waving.
I'm sorry, we're
Our building officials.
Someone in the back who is a building official?
We're putting him on the spot.
Currently standing up.
If there aren't unusual circumstances on your lot, like Mr. Biggs talked about, slopes and those types of things, neighboring soils investigation, geotechnical reports are acceptable.
Other questions?
Second part question.
Oh, all right, wait.
One of the planners has a question.
So for the prefab buildings, is there like a minimum clearance that you need through a side yard in order to deliver this thing? Or does the typical 10-foot setback on the side in Los Altos, is that good?
Really good question. We actually use cranes. So we don't need any amount of minimum side yard separation other than what's required from fire code, which is typically 3 feet. And we use a crane to install it in your backyard. If you have backyard alley access, which some very small amount of lots do, we can typically pull into the alley and roll it right off the truck onto the foundation. But more often than not, we're using a crane. And it all occurs in the span of about 3 to 4 hours in one day.
If you don't have underground electrical, can you be forced to do that by adding an ADU?
Could you hand that mic to
The
the-
question was, can you be forced to do underground electrical?
I think our building official's ready to
Oh.
answer that.
The fellow in the back.
So if you run your service to your ADU from the main house, you would trench that underground or go under the existing raised floor area and then trench from the house to the ADU. If you wanted brand new utilities, which are also allowed, you would be running them underground. So if you wanted to provide your own electrical meters and your own gas meters out there and wanted PG&E to run a separate set of meters, then yes, they would have to go service lateral underground. Typically, when, did you ask if you? Yes, so normally that's what the gentleman that builds these ADUs was suggesting, that if you have an undersized panel on the main house you would need to upgrade the main house in order to feed the accessory structure. Well, you would always be going underground on your property from your existing electrical panel to the ADU. If you're upgrading your electrical main panel on your residence in the same location, no, you do not have to go underground.
Thanks. Question here?
Have your prefabs been accepted by the City of Los Altos?
In particular, the City of Los Altos has not reviewed our prefabricated designs. Our prefabricated designs are actually reviewed by the state of California, and thus when we come in for a permit with the City of Los Altos, they will review our foundation and utility connections, but the structure itself arrives fully inspected and permitted at the state level. That's typically how prefabricated buildings with HCD stamps arrive on site.
Great. So I'd love to just ask a question back about the fire sprinkler issue that was raised. So it seems that there's a bit of conflict, and I think this is occurring in a lot of places, between state language and what cities or counties are adopting. And when I read the state language, it says very clearly that if fire sprinklers are not required for the main house, they're not required for the ADU. And it also has a very clear statement that says local jurisdictions may adopt ordinances that are less restrictive, but may not be more. So how do you manage, or how are we resolving these types of issues when one agency sets a standard like that that seems completely counter to the state regulation, but the homeowner is stuck sort of in the middle trying to figure out how to navigate?
Well, that's the good thing about us working on a new set of ADU regulations to take in front of the council, because it'll be giving us a good opportunity to resolve issues and conflicts like this. So
You'll coordinate with the county?
We'll coordinate with the county, make them aware that with the adoption of the new state regulations, we are limited in terms of what we can require for these accessory dwelling units. So, and we're in the process of doing that now.
If I may further that conversation, I have spoken to the fire marshal of the Santa Clara County Fire Department, and they have spoken with the state. And the determination they have made is that the fire code trumps that law on fire sprinklers due to distance or lack of fire hydrants or fire flow. So it's always good to check with the fire department. Again, they measure from local fire hydrants and the distance to the truck and back to these ADUs. So there's different regulations. I haven't seen a lot of ADUs have to get sprinkler due to distance. There are some, but again, that's a fire department call.
All right, we have time for one more question over here, and then we'll shift to the tables, and you can ask more specific questions, but I'll introduce that in a moment.
Are there any special rental restrictions, like rent control on these ADUs, other than not being a short-term rental?
Repeat the question.
The question was whether or not there were any rent restrictions on accessory dwelling units, and for Los Altos, there are not any rent restrictions. The only thing that you cannot do with a permitted accessory dwelling unit is rent it for less than 30 days. It can't be a short-term rental. It has to be rented for at least 30 days per our regulations.
Okay, let's thank our panelists for their expertise. So now, I'm not quite sure of the logistics. Our panelists will grab their name tags and go find a table, and you can ask them specific questions. And in addition, they will be joined by Kamal Hyder, another builder of of ADUs, and David Klein, who are also builders of ADUs. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to ask questions. Thank you.